Hello, biology students. Today we're going to get into a little bit more in depth about the process of homeostasis and how the body control systems work specifically. So, in general, we have lots of internal and external factors such as temperature changes, infections, stress, pollution. All these factors can be affecting us in a wide variety of ways. Fortunately for us, we have lots of mechanisms that we've evolved over time to help us maintain and control our systems and maintaining this homeostasis. Okay, so remember the definition of homeostasis is a regulation and maintenance of internal environment within a narrow range that are necessary to support life at a cellular level. So in this first section here, exploration one, we're just going to talk about general terms of how homeostasis works for all body systems. And in the second section here, we're going to get into some specifics related to individual systems. Okay, so generally speaking, we'll be talking about this diagram here. If you look in your book, you can go through here and click on the different numbers and it can play the information for you. But basically, once you have a stimulus, a stimulus is anything from an internal or external environment that causes an imbalance in the internal conditions of the cell, organ system, or organism. Okay, so when our body receives a stimulus in one way, shape, or form, we go through the process of detecting it with certain types of cells called receptors. Okay, there are thousands of internal receptors, our nervous system, and on the cellular level, where these specialized proteins are detecting information about changes in our external environment. So number three, the receptor sends information to the control center. All right, control center being the brain, the nervous system, or in the cellular level, the nucleus. And often in the central nervous system, the control center compares the information to set points. In other words, these set points are like individual values for the conditions which the body functions work best. Okay, so the temperature value is a great example. And so the set point for our temperature is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, or what is that in Celsius? Okay. Number four, if the control center detects movements away from the set point, it responds by sending messages through one of the organism's communication systems. These messages sent by the control center are carried to effectors that carry out the response. Okay. Now these effector cells, there's a wide variety of these. We'll talk more about that in the next section here. All right. So five, the response restores balance by returning internal conditions to their set points. Okay. So it's all about maintaining balance. So we pick up some type of stimulus. The control center processes information and compares it to a set point. And these receptors are the parts of the cell or the organism that are picking up this information and sending that information out from the control center to these effectors, which coordinate a response and try to make sure that the system is now balanced again. So this is a very important paragraph here. Homeostasis depends on the communication between these receptors, control centers, and the effectors. In the human body, communication is the joint responsibility of the nervous system and the endocrine system. So the nervous system picks up this information, processes it in the different control centers like the brain, spinal cord, and then sends out that information to various parts of the body. Unlike the nervous system, endocrine system uses more direct but still rapid method communication, which are called hormones. Okay, you teenagers know all about these hormones, don't you? Poor fellas, you guys have all these hormones floating around your bodies right now, infecting all of your decision-making processes. I feel so sorry for you. Anywho, so these hormones are chemicals that are secreted into the bloodstream by ductless endocrine glands. Hormones then travel through the body, acting only on cells that have receptors for those particular hormones. This is really important concept. Okay, each one of your cells has a group of receptors. You can think of it like a certain key to a doorway. Okay, and they only respond to certain types of hormones and vice versa. So, for instance, adrenaline. If you get scared or something happens and you hear a loud noise, your body may release adrenaline, and this adrenaline is released from your adrenal glands and directly into your bloodstream, and it has an immediate response to your heart. Your heart gets exposed to adrenaline, and it automatically increases the rapid beating processes. So it's automatic. You don't have to think about it. Once those hormones touch those cells in the heart, it's an involuntary response. It happens whether you want it to or not. And it's very difficult to control if you've ever been in that situation. So so you have these receptors here detect a change in the internal condition, causing a stray outside of the set point. The control center communicates instructions to the effectors. The effectors act to restore the internal environment back to its original set point. This interaction is what we call a feedback loop. Okay, and this is the part where we're going to focus on next. So here's a little lab activity. You can do this on your own if you like. Okay, so the first feedback loop is called a negative feedback loop. All right. Consider what happened if you did the book activity. Consider what happens there when you put the book on top of your head. You feel it going one direction, and your immediate response is to counterbalance it the opposite way. That's pretty much what a negative feedback loop is in reality. Once a stimulus causes an imbalance in one direction, this imbalance is detected by the receptors and sends its information to the control center. The control center evaluates the information and sends a signal to the effectors to make an adjustment that is the opposite direction of the stimulus, therefore returning the system to balance. All right. Why is this process called a loop? Okay, because the receptors also check new conditions that result from actions of the effectors and then update the control center. All right. So here's a good little diagram here that you need to commit to memory. All right. So here we go. So stimulus causes a deviation from the set point. In other words, it causes the system to be off balance. So the receptors detect the change, and then the control center compares the information from the receptors to the set point. All right. And then basically the question is asked, is there an imbalance? If there is an imbalance, effector cells carry out the response from the control center. The imbalance is counteracted. In other words, it is put back into balance. And then the control center compares the information again to the set point. And the question is then asked again, is there an imbalance? If the answer is no, then the body is at homeostasis. Okay, so this is what we call a negative feedback loop. This is a great example of the thermostat in the house. Okay, you can read through that. Okay, now positive feedback loops are different. Instead of counteracting the stimulus, positive feedback loop actually amplifies the stimulus. In other words, it makes it larger. Okay, so like we said, the positive feedback loop makes the adjustment in the same direction as the stimulus. All right, scientists refer to the positive feedback loop as a reinforcing loop because they amplify the stimulus instead of counteracting it. Okay, so we scroll down here. Here's another little model diagram of the positive feedback loop. Stimulus causes deviation from the set point. The receptor detects the change. The control center compares to the receptor points. Everything's the same. Okay. Ask the question, is there an imbalance? And the answer is yes. Effector cells carry out a response from the control center, and the response is amplified. In other words, it's increased. All right. Is this task complete? Ask the question again. If the answer is no, we go back here, carries out the response from the control center, amplifies. Is the task complete again? All right. If it is yes, then it compares to the set point. All right. Is it in balance? The answer is no. Then the body is in a state of homeostasis. So the body uses both positive and negative feedback loops. Positives are not as many in the human system as negative feedback loops. But one feedback loop that is very important, positive feedback loop that's very important, is the process of blood clotting. All right. So let's say your body, your body depends on maintaining blood volume and pressure. If you get a cut and you have loss of blood, so the body depends on the positive feedback loop to quickly generate the clot to stop the bleeding. Okay, so remember about platelets. You have platelets in your blood. All right, so this occurs as the platelets and clotting factors stimulate the activation of more platelets and clotting factors at the wound site. So in other words, once you get a cut and detect a loss of blood pressure, right, the signal then is sent to release more platelets. Okay, and your body's going to keep producing platelets until that wound has stopped the bleeding process. Okay, and lucky for us, this happens extremely fast, and was able to clot the cut for us. So remember, people who have the genetic disorder, what's it called? What's the genetic disorder called? I forgot. Drawing a blank. Anyway, I'll remember. I'll come back to it in a minute. So positive feedback loops are not as common, like I said, but they're still as important. Okay. So let's go down to the next part here. All right, so we're ready for exploration 2. And exploration 2 here starts, if you're in your textbook, it starts on page 37. Okay, so in the human body, homeostasis regulates many different things, such as body temperature, water balance, salt levels, pH, nutrients, and gases. Because all these things have specific set points, in other words, there's specific values that are the optimal range for the body to use. The body requires feedback loops in order to maintain homeostasis. Okay, now here is the positive and negative feedback. This is what I put up here for one of your A-level assignments here. So if you choose to do that, you can go to the Schoology page and download that lab and work on that. If not, that's your choice. So organ systems are constantly interacting to maintain homeostasis. Okay, I'm not going to read over all these, but you can read over how the body maintains blood pressure. Okay, here, and you can look at the cause and effect section here too. If your body, like you may know someone in your family, an older person who has difficulty with their blood pressure, all right, and you probably understand that that's really dangerous. Over a long time, your blood pressure is too high. It can really affect the organs and cause lots of other health problems. The one that we're going to focus on here is maintaining glucose concentrations. So remember, glucose is what we call blood sugar. And it's a very important function here. If it gets out of balance, it can kill you. For instance, if your body doesn't produce enough insulin and your blood sugar is too high, it can be deadly. If your blood sugar gets too low, you can go into a coma, which can be deadly too. And so the body has evolved a couple of different feedback loops here we'll go over. And so let's say you're at a state of homeostasis, and then your blood sugar drops, right? And like one of the side effects of your blood sugar dropping, you get hungry. In some situations, people can get a little bit irritable, right, or hangry, as they called it. Or you're getting a bad mood because you're hungry. That's there's a reason for that, because your glucose levels have dropped, and the receptors detect this change, and they send a message to the pancreas, which releases glycogen. Remember, glycogen is something we studied several times. That is a big polymer chain of glucose that's stored in the liver, right? So the pancreas tells the liver to release that into the bloodstream in the form of glucose, right? And once that happens, the blood glucose then raises, and then you're back at a state of homeostasis, okay? Now, the opposite effect here. Let's say your blood sugar gets too high. Okay, the blood sugar gets too high. You eat a bunch of candy bars or whatever, and your blood sugar goes through the roof. So these receptors detect this change. The pancreas releases a different hormone called insulin. Okay, and insulin is then helps the body cells take up the glucose, and it also tells the liver to store glucose in the form of glycogen. So instead of releasing it over here, it's causing it to store it. And so the blood glucose levels then drops, and then you're back to homeostasis. Okay, so a person who, let's say, has diabetes, at this point here, their pancreas doesn't have the ability to release insulin because it doesn't produce it. And so if that's the case, it cannot go through the process of lowering the blood sugar. And so this is why they have to have injections of insulin after they eat in order to maintain this balance. All right. And so if a person with diabetes doesn't get this insulin, it can be deadly. Okay. So this is a good example of a positive or negative feedback loop. Which one is this? Oh, this is negative, because it counteracts the stimulus, right? So this is really important. You can read through here with the carbon dioxide concentrations too. This is another one. If we were in school, we would actually do a lab of this one, to where we would actually do a variation of this lab and detect the concentration levels of carbon dioxide after exercise. But for now, this should be a review. We went over this a couple times last year, I think, in life science, and you guys can read back over here. Okay. So let me scroll down here, because this is pretty much all review. Okay. I'm not going to go over all this stuff. I just want to point out here that disruptions in homeostasis can be temporary. They give the example of the rhinovirus. This is the type of virus that causes the common cold. Okay. And for most cases, the common cold is not deadly, but it is a major inconvenience, that's for sure. Okay. So this is it's an example of a temporary change in homeostasis. All right. It is not permanent. So it has short-term effects. All right. However, some situations, long-term effects to imbalance of homeostasis can cause major damages. One of those is an interesting disruption called Cushing's syndrome. Now, this disorder is caused by a long-term elevation of the hormone cortisol. Okay. Now, cortisol is a hormone that is released in stressful situations, is one of the situations. So if you have prolonged, shall we say, environmental stressors, all right, this can cause cortisol to be in your bloodstream for too long of a period, and it can cause other organs to be damaged. All right. For instance, when it remains elevated for long periods of time, it disrupts the glucose and fat metabolism. In other words, it can make you gain weight. All right. Immune system response. You probably heard about this before, right? If you're stressed out for too long, it can cause your immune system to be disrupted. For instance, most of us have been exposed to a virus called herpes simplex, and it shows up as what we call a cold sore. And if you notice, like if you've been sick or you've been under a lot of stress for long periods of time, that's when you tend to have these cold sore outbreaks around your mouth. Anyway, so that's related to that. Also, cortisol can affect your sleep patterns. It can cause blood pressure to increase. And over time, can cause a lot of other disorders such as hypertension, high blood pressure, diabetes, strokes, and even heart attacks. So here's some more information about that. And anyway, so you're going to have the assignment on Schoology where you're going to compare and contrast positive and negative feedback loops. In the body, be sure that you include information from Exploration 1 and Exploration 2. Once you do that, there's going to be a little 10-question quiz over the information that was covered in these 2 sections. Please read the book. I'm going to put some questions in there that I did not go over today, but they're definitely found in the textbook. So please check those out. All right.